Luke, is it?
Yes, it is. Hi, Jackson. How you going, buddy?
Good, how are you?
I'm well, mate.
That's good.
Heading into the city?
That's it, thank you.
No worries.
Luke Pollard has been driving Ubers for 6 years. He's part of an evolving workforce known as the gig economy. One of around 1 million Australians operating in the freelance or independent contract market.
Takes a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit to be an Uber driver. Effectively, you're making your own hours, working when you want to work, clocking on, clocking off as it suits you to, staying out for however long you choose. You're your own boss, and the best part about it probably is the flexibility.
But that flexibility has its downfalls. As a gig worker, Luke is an independent contractor under Australian law, not an employee, and contract arrangements don't account for benefits like minimum pay and superannuation. As the number of gig workers grows, so too do questions about reform, and gig economy regulations are under the microscope.
Thanks, Jackson.
Thank you, Luke.
These issues were front and centre at an Australian Government Jobs Summit last September. On the table, implementing more structured guidelines for this growing economy and its workers. Later this year, Parliament plans to table new legislation to modernise and regulate the industry. But could over-regulation of this emerging sector do more harm than good? And can a balance be found between protecting workers and allowing the gig economy to thrive? The gig economy is a term we've been hearing a lot in recent years, but it started way back in the early 1900s. The term gig was first used to describe a musical engagement.
Many people think of gig work as a new thing that has come with Uber, but in actual fact it's a term that was first used in the 1910s in Paris with jazz musicians.
But as society evolved and technology advanced, the gig economy took on a new form. With the rise of the internet came new platforms where people could offer their services on a freelance basis. Sites like Upwork and Freelancer meant businesses could find skilled workers without traditional employment contracts. And in the 2010s, the explosion of the sharing economy saw new gig platforms where people could monetize their assets and skills in new ways. Services like Uber provided a way for people to earn money by using their own cars as an alternative to taxis, while Airbnb allowed people to rent out their spare rooms or entire homes. The development of smartphones and apps transformed the gig economy, enabling workers to easily connect with potential clients or customers, manage their work schedules, and process payments.
People have worked in various forms of the gig economy for a very long time throughout history, but what has happened really is that technology platforms have allowed the gig economy to grow, to give people more options on how they work and where they want to work.
And really it's been since the advent of apps like Uber that we have seen the proliferation of the gig type of work, where essentially someone is able to come and go when they want. They're able to choose their work on their own terms, and really it's the same hallmarks of that gig work of the Parisian saxophonist in 1910. It's really just bringing it to a modern context via the technology app.
With the rise of on-demand services, such as ride-hailing, food delivery, and home cleaning, workers can now easily find work through apps such as Uber and DoorDash. These platforms helped redefine the gig economy and provide a way for people to set their own work schedule without the constraints of traditional employment.
Let's start with the two most populous states in this nation, moving to shutdown of non-essential business.
During the challenging COVID-19 pandemic, gig platforms offered a lifeline to many, and the industry exploded. Thousands of people suddenly found themselves out of work, turning to platforms like Uber and DoorDash to earn money.
In the early months of COVID, as people were being laid off in the hospitality sector, we saw the next day they were coming to Uber and looking for more work.
Gig economy businesses played a critical role for those who could no longer go to the office, get to grocery stores or restaurants, with customers turning to delivery services to supply daily necessities.
Without the gig economy, we would have had a very different COVID experience for people at home. Restaurants and hospitality venues have made it very clear that as they shifted onto sort of an app-based way of delivering their services, that without the gig economy, many of them wouldn't have survived.
Services like Uber Eats were a lifeline. I think people in lockdowns being able to access food, restaurant partners being able to keep their doors open, keep their kitchen staff employed, more than ever relied on services like Uber Eats.
It was clear this new and evolving model of work was here to stay. But the pandemic also shone a light on the sector from an industrial relations perspective, raising questions about laws and regulations around workers' rights.
Well, there have been concerns expressed by some that those working in the gig economy aren't paid appropriately for their services. That there have been concerns raised around safety, and that's something that the gig economy industry is working very hard to address.
It's important that laws evolve as work evolves, and I think it's clear that that work has evolved and that we need modern laws for modern work, and that includes gig work.
If you think about industrial relations here in Australia over the last 100 years, a huge amount has been done, but effectively where we stand today, there's two types of work. There is employment with all the benefits that come with that we understand well, and there is contracting, which doesn't have many of the benefits, and in fact a test of whether someone is a contractor is whether they receive those benefits. This dichotomy doesn't need to be the case. We actually think there should be a hybrid approach whereby we can capture the flexibility of contracting while starting to overlay benefits and protections that are more traditionally associated with employment type work.
There are currently close to 70 companies in Australia which fall under the government's working concept of the gig economy, encompassing services such as couriers, personal transport, caring, professional services, and task-based ad hoc work. With such a large number of stakeholders and the future of the gig economy on the line, how can the government strike the right balance with reforms to set a fair and efficient framework for the sector for decades to come? In June last year, Uber and the Transport Workers Union reached an historic agreement to protect Australia's gig economy. At the heart of the deal, creating an independent body to set and enforce industry-wide standards. It marked a major shift to industrial relations in the gig economy and was a key focus at the Albanese government's Jobs and Skills Summit.
Uber has long supported reform to the gig economy. We think this will be a really good thing. We have been working with governments around the world to create reform that creates minimum standards and protections for gig workers.
That means things like minimum earnings, safety standards, insurance, and fair process for dispute resolution.
These are the sort of things that we're really excited to work with the government and industry in ensuring that we can create a higher quality gig work in a way that lifts the tide across the industry and creates a universal safety net for people that are engaged in the gig economy, regardless of what platform they're working on.
This is, like in all things, an attempt to find a balance between making sure that people aren't exploited, and there's not a lot of sign that people are being exploited because they're doing this voluntarily. So you're trying to balance the concerns around exploitation with the flexibility that the gig economy brings to the economy more broadly and to people who work within it.
But while improving working standards is clearly a step in the right direction, there are concerns that over-regulation could backfire.
As in any new industry, regulation is going to be behind here. It's going to be behind where the industry has got to, and there's always the danger of over-regulation, and which would strangle the gig economy.
At the heart of the discussion is flexibility, making sure workers can choose when and how they clock on for a shift. Aaron is a care worker who uses the marketplace app Mabel to connect with his clients.
Hey Stephen, how you going, boss? Good, mate? Ready for a good day? Yeah?
So how it works is people that want to provide services via Mabel can sign up to the platform. They go through a rigorous screening and onboarding process. So once they're approved to provide services, they're visible to people that want to engage care and support, and they can search in their local community for people based on the things that matter. They can post quite detailed jobs that describe what they're looking for. The service providers are able to respond to those jobs or searches, and they connect directly to agree whether it makes sense for the parties to engage and on what terms they engage, and they document all that via the platform. And what the platform does is provide that connectivity, but provide a range of safeguards that support people in engaging directly.
Mabel is just one of many businesses facing reforms under the Albanese government's model of the gig economy.
On a platform like Mabel, it is the parties that are entering into highly tailored arrangements around their individual needs. And we think that that is highly effective in enabling people to get the right support at the right time. What we don't need are bureaucratic processes that add friction and add cost to those arrangements being put in place.
I can post hours that I'm available around my schedule and my other commitments, and that allows the client to know when I would be available to support them, rather than being told, you know, we need you at this specific time to do this specific job.
Flexibility is critical to both sides of the marketplace, those that rely on support and those that offer support. So if you want to live a good life, your support can't be rostered, it can't be scheduled. Similarly, most people providing support are people that live in these same communities that have other life commitments as well and need flexibility to be able to offer services. So when you put people in a relationship via Mabel, the flexibility on both sides of that marketplace becomes critically important.
And it's not just the care community where flexibility is key. Fadi is an Uber driver who is studying to become a social worker.
I'm studying social work by distance education, so I do spend my daytime sitting at my desk studying, and then Uber basically comes at nighttime work, which works perfectly for me. If I were to work in a normal 9-to-5 job, that will affect my study negatively. So Uber gives me that right balance between study and work.
If you think about what traditional employment looks like, it's, you know, set shifts, resumes and job interviews, sort of a manager telling you what to do. What gig work offers is very different from that.
The vast majority, well over 90%, do it as a secondary source of income. It's not their primary source of income. So it's really an adjunct for most people to allow them to earn more money at a time of their choosing.
It's the ability to come online when you want, to switch off when you want. If you don't want to work on that day, no worries at all. If you want to have a few weeks or months or years off, no worries at all. Wear what you want and allow this job to work for you around what you need to do.
Whether it's you know, a parent who is you know, a mum fitting this in around drop-offs for her kids, or a student who's fitting you know, delivering in around studying and social life, and the idea of work that is on your own terms and fits in around your priorities, I think has really resonated with people, and that's why gig work has grown you know, so quickly and continues to grow here in Australia.
Lena has been working for the Uber Eats app for 2.5 years.
I like it doing Uber because I can choose any time for working. And for example, I have a student visa and students, and one time I go to school, other time I have my main job, and the rest of the time I can do in Uber. It's very good for this.
The flexibility that something like Uber offers means that I can organise my week to spend more time with my family. I'm a grandfather, I have 2 beautiful granddaughters I like to spend time with every week. So I can organise my time with them, I can organise my time driving, and I can organise my time working on other things.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And while most gig workers are in favour of setting minimum standards, a recent study by research firm Ipsos revealed 93% of Uber drivers believe that laws introducing new protections and benefits must also preserve the right to earn flexibly. The same study also found that 2 out of 3 drivers prefer independent contractor status over employee status. Only 7% of drivers and delivery people use the platform for what resembles full-time work. 3 out of 4 earners say they work another job outside of the industry. And a staggering 9 out of 10 drivers and delivery people say they would not keep driving or delivering if it did not offer flexibility.
Those numbers are not a surprise because that's the beauty of the service that's provided here. People are able to work at the time that is convenient to them.
I think the biggest thing that has become clear to me over time working with Uber is the recognition that I don't want to be an employee. I enjoy being my own boss, I enjoy managing my own time, I enjoy running my own business. Certainly I rely upon Uber for certain services, but I don't want to be their employee. I don't want to be anybody's employee, and I think the bulk of the people who get into this work really want to work for themselves.
Getting this wrong could be disastrous for workers and the industry as a whole. Coming up, we look to Switzerland, where gig economy laws were overhauled with dramatic results. In the coming months, the Albanese government will table new workplace reforms that will impact the gig economy. But there are concerns that if the laws are too restrictive, it could have serious consequences for gig workers and the gig economy as a whole. In Geneva, Switzerland, Uber Eats operated under essentially the same model as Australia and other countries. Couriers signed up to use the app independently, with no limit on how many people could seek jobs. The couriers decided when, where and how they worked, and whether to accept or decline a delivery request. That all changed in September 2020, when a series of court rulings in Geneva saw the company change its operating model. Couriers could no longer sign up to Uber Eats as independent contractors. Instead, they had to work as an employee of a fleet operator, a delivery company that hires traditional employees. The move instantly put 77% of couriers out of work. In 3 months, the Uber Eats workforce dropped from 1,300 couriers to just 300. And for those few hundred who are now Uber Eats employees, their work has fundamentally changed. They are assigned to shifts by the fleet and are told by managers where and when to be available. Those who don't comply with fleet rules or fail to meet performance targets risk being sacked. And rather than immediate access to their earnings through instant pay, couriers are paid monthly. The impact on the workforce was laid bare in an Uber employee survey, which found 72% of the couriers hired as employees preferred working independently. Their dissatisfaction came from the loss of flexibility under the new model. 62% of couriers who felt they were worse off due to the change cited no longer being able to choose their own schedules, while 50% reported that they do not intend to continue working as an employee in the long run.
Some of the lessons from this are that if we simply just shoehorning gig work into an employment framework, it comes with trade-offs. And so it's really important to get it right and make sure that the things that that gig workers value in the gig economy and the things that make it successful and work are still able to be preserved through the reform process, while at the same time introducing minimum standards and protections that are incredibly important for gig workers.
The thing I'd be concerned about, and would certainly impact upon me, is were we to be pushed into a position of being employees rather than self-employed individuals, that would probably push me out of this work.
The beauty about working for Mabel and being a contractor is a lot of people in the industry may only be able to actually give 15 hours a week or 20 hours or even just 5 hours a week because they have other commitments, maybe family, maybe they have another job. So to force people into full-time work would mean that the industry is going to lose quite a considerable amount of staff and workers.
Part of my study, I'm doing work placement, which is about 7 hours a day. And then basically on the way back home, I 10 Uber on and pick rides on the way home, get back home and study. So if the government were to say, oh, you have to work 9 to 5 shift, then I will have no job.
So is it possible we could see a Geneva situation here in Australia?
Well, that would be the worst of all worlds. It would be a bad outcome for those who are providing the services. It would be a terrible outcome for those who are utilising the services.
Since April this year, the government has been consulting with gig economy businesses, with companies making submissions as part of the reform process.
We're really encouraged by the steps that the government is taking to create modern reforms for modern work, and we think that if we get this right and the reform is fit for purpose, that it can create a lot of benefits for delivery people and drivers and can be really a great outcome for the gig economy across Australia.
I remain optimistic that we can land on smart reforms that are able to modernise the Australian industrial relations system for this modern type of work. However, that will play out in the months to come.
We need to be very careful here that we don't go too far, or else it will drive prices up, it will drive people away from working flexibly, and it will also make it more difficult for people to get the services that they've become very much used to.
I would say to the government, talk to drivers, talk to delivery people, find out from them, what's important to them, what do they value and what do they want. Their voice is the most important in this reform process.
The gig economy, whether we like it or not, it's the future. Many things are changing. They're not traditional, but they are the future, and we need to catch up with the future, not be stuck in the past.
From jazz gigs in the early 1900s to modern social media platforms, the gig economy has a long and diverse history. It's evolved and adapted to become an integral part of our modern-day economy. And while the future holds some uncertainty for now, it's likely the gig economy will continue to play a major role in the way we work and live for decades to come.